Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro Revenge Story. Back in 2019, I was married to she who shall remain unnamed at family gatherings. For simplicity's sake, let's call her Jessie. There was a noticeable age difference when we tied the knot. I was 29 and Jessie was 21. We weathered our fair share of highs and lows, and during one particularly rough patch about a year after our wedding, we found ourselves drowning in credit card debt. We had to move in with her mother, who battled numerous chronic health issues without insurance. Her stepfather, Ryan, worked as a self-taught mechanic, pretty decent at it actually, but struggled to find steady work due to his own health problems. Moving in would cut costs and help family. That's the right thing to do, isn't it? The problem was that Jessie and I couldn't seem to hold jobs simultaneously. She'd get laid off just as I started a new position, and vice versa. After roughly 9 months of this frustrating cycle, I thought, screw it, I'll get all the jobs. "You can't work yourself to death," Jessie said when I told her my plan. "Watch me," I replied, already scrolling through job listings on my phone. I landed a weeknight job, then added a weekend gig. The temp agency I registered with aggressively found me decent weekday positions regularly. The only issue was these jobs were over an hour from her mom's place, and I'd be so exhausted from working that I'd crash at my brother's apartment just 10 minutes away in the neighboring city. I could only visit Jessie every few days, then had to wake up hours later to beat rush hour traffic to work. 4 months passed, and we slowly inched from red to black financially. One day, Jessie excitedly announced, "I got a job. It's at that marketing firm downtown." The position was about 20 minutes away, but I was the only one with a functioning car. She arranged rides with friends when I wasn't available, and I drove her whenever possible. This arrangement lasted about a month before she approached me one evening while I was checking our budget spreadsheet. "I think I need my own car," she said, leaning against the doorframe. I understood her desire for independence and could see how difficult it was for her to rely on others constantly. After some quick calculations, I figured we'd need about 4 months to save enough for a decent used car that wouldn't break down within a year. I explained this timeline to her. She nodded. "That makes sense. I can wait." I saw the disappointment in her eyes, and my pride couldn't bear it. "Maybe there's another way," I said thoughtfully. I intensified my efforts, taking side construction jobs with my buddy Dave's cousin, who paid daily wages to fill the gaps when the temp agency had nothing for me. I pulled double shifts at my weekend job. Sleep became a luxury, averaging 4 or 5 hours nightly. 3 weeks later, I purchased a car for Jessie, a cute little 4x4 I found on Facebook Marketplace. It was mechanically sound but filthy. I parked it at my friend Marco's place and spent a week giving that grimy vehicle the most thorough cleaning of its existence. You could have eaten off the wheel wells. No joke. Marco contributed some affordable but nice touches: wheel paint, seat covers, floor mats, that significantly improved its appearance. When we rolled it out of the garage, Marco's mother couldn't believe it was the same car, and I had to convince her it was. I left my car with Marco and drove home in Jessie's new ride. The timing couldn't have been better. I was about 10 minutes from home when Jessie called. "Can you pick me up? I need to grab some groceries," she said. "Be there in a few," I replied, trying to keep the excitement from my voice. I parked by the curb one house down and knocked on the door. "Come out so we can go," I called through the door. She stepped outside and looked around, confusion evident on her face. "Where's your car?" she asked. "Left it at Marco's." "What did you drive?" "That." I pointed at the car. "Whose car is that?" "Yours." She needed a moment to process that single word. Then her jaw dropped, and she ran back inside, screaming, "Mom! Tyler got me a car!" A couple of years passed. Jessie mastered driving a manual transmission because her baby had one. Between myself and her stepfather, she learned to change the oil herself and actively participated in replacing the brake pads and all 4 shock absorbers on her baby. She washed her baby with care. She became proficient at maintaining her baby. "I never thought I'd enjoy working on cars," she told me one Saturday as we finished an oil change. "But there's something satisfying about taking care of your own vehicle." Her mother's health issues became mostly manageable with medication, and her stepfather received fairly regular work from friends and previous customers. We moved out of her mom's place, and I reduced my workload to just 2 jobs. Credit card debt decreased by 80%. Jessie secured steady employment and considered returning to school. "I'm thinking about taking some business courses," she mentioned one evening as we sat on our small apartment balcony. "Maybe get my associate's degree." "That sounds great," I encouraged her. "You'd be amazing at it." Then I discovered she was cheating on me. It started with unusual text notifications at odd hours. Her sudden interest in girls' nights that left her unreachable for hours. The classic signs were all there, but I didn't want to see them until I couldn't ignore them anymore. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. There is no third time. There must be consequences. My pride demanded it. The Mad. A week after the nuclear bomb detonated on our marriage, I identified the problem. She had already collected her belongings and moved out by then. I called and asked to meet, lunchtime, near her workplace. Just to talk, I said, keeping my voice neutral. I guess we should talk, she agreed hesitantly. We met at a small outdoor seating area by her office building with plenty of foot traffic, witnesses. After some small talk, she vaguely suggested working things out by referencing my father who had passed away the previous year. Your dad always said relationships take work, remember? He'd want us to try, she said softly. Hell no. She didn't have the right to use him like that. Whatever slim chance existed vanished instantly. I cut her off mid-sentence. I'm taking the car. Your car. What? Her eyes widened. The title is in my name. I'm reclaiming my property right now. If you don't hand over the keys immediately, I'll report it stolen to the police. But you gave that car to me, she protested, her voice rising. Until this point, I'd maintained a normal conversational tone. The pain of her betrayal hit me for the 1,000th time. My voice hardened. I didn't give the car to you. I gave the car to my wife. Her brain still wasn't processing the situation clearly. But how will I get to work? She stammered. I stared directly into her eyes. Get your boyfriend to drive you. The realization finally dawned on her face as she understood I was completely serious. She fumbled in her purse and handed over the keys, her hand trembling slightly. Tyler, please. I took the keys without another word, got into her baby, and drove away. As I passed, I glimpsed her stunned expression, and I drove all the way home with the biggest, most satisfied grin on my face. The next one is an entitled people story. I've been a cop for about 15 years now, and I thought I'd seen every type of entitled person you could imagine. Drunk drivers who insist they're sober, shoplifters who claim they were just holding it, and Karen types who demand to speak to my supervisor because I won't let them park in handicapped spots. But nothing prepared me for dealing with my HOA president when I bought my first house. The property I bought was a bit unique. It sat on the edge of a neighborhood that had been developed around it. The original owner had refused to sell to the developers, so they built around the lot, and eventually the old guy passed away and his family sold it to me. The lot was about half an acre, which was huge compared to the tiny yards everyone else had, and it backed up to a small creek that ran behind several of the HOA houses. When I first moved in, everything seemed fine. My neighbors were polite, the area was quiet, and I was thrilled to finally have some space after years of apartment living. I had big plans for the backyard, maybe a workshop, definitely a garden, and I was looking forward to having barbecues without being 3 feet from my neighbor's window. That's when I met the HOA president. This guy showed up at my door about 2 weeks after I moved in, clipboard in hand, wearing a polo shirt with the neighborhood logo embroidered on it. He introduced himself and started walking around my property like he owned the place, making notes on his little clipboard. He pointed to my back fence and said the HOA needed access to the creek for maintenance purposes and that I'd need to remove about 10 feet of fencing. Then he mentioned that my grass was half an inch too long according to HOA standards. Finally, he informed me that I'd need to get approval for any landscaping changes and that my mailbox wasn't the approved style for the neighborhood. I politely explained that I wasn't actually part of the HOA. My property had never been included in the development, and I had the deed to prove it. I showed him the survey that clearly marked my property boundaries, extending all the way to the creek. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my land. His face went red, and he started sputtering about neighborhood standards and property values. He insisted that everyone in the area had to follow HOA rules regardless of membership. When I continued to politely disagree and mentioned that I was a police officer who was pretty familiar with property law, he stormed off, muttering something about getting to the bottom of this. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I figured he'd looked into it and realized he was wrong. I kept working on my house, mowed my lawn when I felt like it, and started planting my garden. Then the letters started coming. First, it was a notice of violation for my grass height, then another for my non-compliant mailbox. Then one claiming I was illegally restricting HOA access to community waterway maintenance. Each letter got more aggressive and demanded immediate compliance or face fines and legal action. I called the HOA's management company and tried to explain the situation, but they just kept referring me back to the president. When I asked to see documentation showing that my property was part of the HOA, they said they'd get back to me, and never did. The final straw came when I got home from a particularly long shift to find contractors in my backyard, removing my fence. The HOA president was there, supervising and looking smug. When I asked what was going on, he announced that since I'd refused to comply with reasonable requests, the HOA was exercising their right to maintain community property. I told the contractors to stop work immediately and showed them my badge. They were just doing a job and didn't want any trouble, so they packed up quickly. The president started yelling about how I was abusing my authority and interfering with legitimate HOA business. That's when I decided it was time for some malicious compliance. I went inside and pulled out all my property documents, the deed, the survey, the title insurance, everything. Then I did what I do best as a cop. I investigated. I spent the weekend digging through county records, HOA bylaws, and development documents. What I found was very interesting. The HOA had been formed when the neighborhood was developed, but my property had never been included in the original declaration. However, there was a clause in the HOA bylaws that stated any property owner could voluntarily join the HOA by signing an agreement and paying a fee. Once you joined, you had to follow all rules and pay all assessments, but you also got voting rights and could run for the board. I also discovered that the HOA president had been making unilateral decisions without board approval, which violated their own bylaws. Most of the other board members were just neighbors who'd been talked into serving and didn't really pay attention to what he was doing. On Monday morning, I called the HOA management company and told them I wanted to join the HOA. They seemed confused, given all the previous drama, but I explained that I'd thought it over and decided it would be good for neighborhood unity. The president wasn't available, but they said they'd send me the paperwork. When the documents arrived, I signed everything, paid the initiation fee and first year's dues, and submitted my application. I also requested a complete copy of the HOA bylaws, meeting minutes for the past 2 years, and the current budget. As a new member, I had the right to review all HOA business. The president called me that evening, and I could tell he was suspicious, but also pleased. He probably thought he'd finally worn me down and gotten me to surrender. He mentioned that there would be a board meeting the following week to discuss ongoing compliance issues and that I was welcome to attend as a new member. I spent that week preparing. I reviewed every violation letter I'd received, cross-referenced them with the actual HOA bylaws, and documented every interaction I'd had with the president. I also reached out to a few neighbors who I'd heard complaining about some of the president's decisions. The night of the board meeting, I showed up with a folder full of documents and a notebook. The meeting was held in the community center, and besides the 5 board members, there were maybe 8 other homeowners present. The president ran through the usual business, approving minutes, discussing the budget, reviewing maintenance issues. Then he got to what he clearly considered the main event, my compliance issues. He started going through all the violation letters he'd sent me, reading them aloud like he was prosecuting a case. He talked about my non-compliant mailbox, my excessive grass height, and my illegal obstruction of creek access. He was really working himself up, gesticulating and raising his voice. When he finished, he looked at me expectantly, probably waiting for an apology or explanation. Instead, I raised my hand and asked to address the board. I started by thanking everyone for welcoming me as a new HOA member and mentioned how much I appreciated being part of such a well-organized community. Then I opened my folder. First, I pointed out that according to the bylaws, violation notices could only be issued after a formal complaint was filed and reviewed by the Architectural Review Committee. I asked to see the documentation of these complaints and committee reviews. The president looked confused and said that as president, he had the authority to issue violations directly. I politely read the relevant section of the bylaws aloud, which clearly stated that the president couldn't unilaterally issue violations. Several board members started looking uncomfortable. Next, I addressed the excessive grass height violations. I'd actually measured my grass every week since the first letter, and it had never exceeded the HOA limit of 3 inches. I had photos with rulers for scale. The president stammered something about overall appearance, but the bylaws were specific about measurable standards. Then I got to the good part. The creek access issue. I pulled out my property survey and spread it on the table. I explained that my property extended all the way to the creek and that the HOA had no legal right to access it for maintenance or any other purpose. Several neighbors leaned forward to look at the survey, but here's where the malicious compliance really kicked in. I mentioned that as a new HOA member, I'd been reviewing the community's shared spaces and common areas. According to the HOA documents, members had the right to reasonable enjoyment of all community amenities. I'd noticed that the creek behind my property was listed in the HOA's master deed as a community waterway that all members could access for recreation. I thought this was wonderful since I loved fishing and had been hoping to use the creek more. However, I'd also noticed that there was currently no way for HOA members to actually access this community amenway since it was behind my property and several others. This seemed like a problem that needed to be addressed. The president was nodding along, probably thinking I was about to offer him the access he'd been demanding. Instead, I suggested that the HOA might want to consider purchasing easement rights from all the property owners along the creek, or perhaps buying some of our land outright to create proper community access. I mentioned that as a police officer, I was familiar with property values in the area and that creekfront land was going for about twice the normal rate. If the HOA wanted to buy just the creekside portion of my lot to create community access, I'd be happy to sell it to them for fair market value. I estimated it would cost them about $40,000 just for my section. The room got very quiet. I could see people doing math in their heads, trying to figure out what it would cost to buy easements or land from all the affected properties. The president's face was turning purple. One of the board members asked how much this would cost in total, and I said I'd done some rough calculations. To properly provide community access to the community waterway, the HOA would need to spend somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000. Of course, that would mean a significant increase in HOA dues for everyone. Another board member pointed out that they didn't have that kind of money in their budget and asked if the creek access was really necessary. I said that as a new member, I was just concerned that the HOA was advertising amenities to residents that they couldn't actually provide. It seemed like a potential legal issue. The president finally exploded. He started yelling about how I was twisting everything around and that all he'd wanted was reasonable access for maintenance. I calmly replied that I completely understood and that I was sure the HOA's insurance company and legal counsel would want to review any maintenance activities on private property to make sure there were no liability issues. I mentioned that as a police officer, I'd seen several cases where people got hurt during unauthorized work on private property, and the resulting lawsuits had been pretty expensive. I'd hate for the HOA to face that kind of risk. By now, the other board members were asking a lot of questions about previous maintenance activities and whether they'd been properly authorized. The president was digging himself deeper with every answer, admitting that he'd made most decisions unilaterally. The meeting ended with the board voting to suspend all violation enforcement pending a complete review of procedures. They also voted to seek legal counsel before any future maintenance activities on or near private property. Over the next few months, things got very interesting. The legal review revealed that the president had been operating way outside his authority for years. Several of his decisions had put the HOA at risk of lawsuits, and the insurance company was not happy. The other board members, who were mostly just neighbors trying to help their community, were horrified to learn about the potential liability issues. At the next election, the president was voted out by a landslide. The new board officially acknowledged that my property was not subject to HOA violations since it had never been properly included in the original development. They also established proper procedures for any future maintenance near private property. As for me, I ended up staying in the HOA. The new leadership was reasonable, and it was actually nice being part of the community. Plus, I figured it was better to be on the inside, keeping an eye on things, than to deal with potential future problems from the outside. The former president moved away about 6 months later. I heard through neighbors that he'd gotten frustrated with the new board's excessive bureaucracy and failure to maintain community standards. My grass is still exactly 2 3/4 inches tall, my mailbox remains wonderfully non-compliant, and I have a beautiful garden growing right up to my property line. And every time I'm out there working in the yard, I smile knowing that the creek behind my house is officially a community waterway that would cost the HOA about $200,000 to actually access. Sometimes the best way to deal with an unreasonable person is to give them exactly what they're asking for. The next one is a petty revenge story. I woke up today to the craziest tea ever from my girlfriend. This guy she knows is a serial cheater. He cheated on multiple women and even on her friend. He used to insult her body and say things like, she doesn't have a motherly feeling to her because she's flat and stuff like that. He also sent some similar really weird messages to my girlfriend while he was dating her friend IDK if he thought he was flirting. That's the type of guy he is. Very horny, very sneaky. And you can tell he does nothing with his life because this shit is all he spends his time doing, so my girlfriend's friend dumped him. Obviously because he cheated on her with someone else. Later he dated multiple other women, also cheated on them, and basically became known as the local harlot. That's not even the tea. Recently he cheated on the girl he was dating for a while and she lost it. She must have stolen his phone or something because there's no other explanation. She posted from his Instagram account revealing all of it. The cheating, the texts with other women, sending and receiving nudes, basically every receipt. The wildest part is she also outed him as bisexual. She revealed his DMs and comments in certain subreddits, our sissy boys being one of them, his DMs sexting with guys, him talking to guys who like to cross-dress, and even his own interest in cross-dressing. She posted all of those messages on his account as himself, and sent them to all his contacts on WhatsApp, most likely including his work contacts and family. He was flirting. What he considers flirting is extremely disgusting, I've seen the messages, with both men and women on Reddit, had a fake Instagram account just for sexting, and used to send profiles from his main to that account so he could message them later. This even included mutuals and some of his girlfriend's friends. Me and my girlfriend disagree on whether he deserved all that. I think he did. What do you think? The next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work in an office in a training department. My manager was super chill and she didn't care much about my schedule and hours I was doing as long as I did the hours my contract said and didn't take a mick. I used to come in at around 7:30 a.m. every day. I didn't start until 8 a.m., but I would come in, say hello to few people, make myself a cup of tea, maybe have a quick chat with someone. I would then start working at around 7:50 a.m., still 10 minutes before my start time. I should finish work at 4:30 p.m., but quite often I would stay until 4:45 p.m. or sometimes go home at 4 p.m., but following day I would stay longer so my hours in a working week would still add to what they supposed to. My awesome manager went on maternity leave, and they gave us some a-hole wannabe manager who hasn't had a clue about us or our job. Since my manager was away, we all had to report to the AH. She hated us. For some weird reason, she hated our department and everyone in it. Never said why, though. Very quickly, she realized I was doing weird hours and pulled me in the office. She started saying all this crap on how I'm stealing company's time and money, how I'm unprofessional, and how she is going to put her foot down and make me work properly. Whatever that means. I tired to listen to her and asked her questions, but she started to say that one more word and you are out. Okay, cool. You are a prick. Great. So I asked, what is it that you want me to do? And she says, do the hours that are stated in your contract. Okay, cool. So, to clarify, I asked, does that mean I have to start at 8 a.m. and finish at 4:30 p.m. every day? She rolled her eyes, looks at me like I'm stupid, and says, it's not that hard. Your contracted hours is what I want to see on your timesheet, not this nonsense you've been doing. Okay, fine. See, I'm petty, very petty, and I don't like AHs. So I go home and sleep like a baby, knowing I will mess her up so much she will start losing her mind. Next day, I come to work and wait by the clocking machine to clock in bang on 8 a.m. Then I work my normal day, and then I go back to the clocking machine and wait to clock out exactly at 4:30 p.m. I'm sure you already know where this is going. But wait! There is more! My super friendly fellow coworkers realized very quickly what I was doing and decided to do the same. There was 10 of us in a team, and we all gathered at the clock machine before and after the shift to clock in and out exactly at 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. The AH manager didn't realize for a while what was going on, until she put a meeting in place at 4 p.m. Well, 4 of us were in that meeting. Comes 4:25 p.m. and all 4 of us get up while she's talking and run out to our desks. We quickly gather our stuff and run to the clock-in machine. Then 2 minutes later, we all clock out and go home. She didn't even have the time to ask what we were doing. Next day, she sends us an invite for 4:30 p.m. and it gets rejected by everyone on my team. She sends nasty email to all of us who rejected that we will be written up for insubordination. We forward the email to HR and ask for a meeting. Meeting happens, the HR lady listens to us, eyes wide open, then laughs, shakes her head and says, leave it with me. We go about our day, then all clock out at exactly 4:30 p.m. Next day, AH manager is nowhere to be seen. HR lady sent email to us asking to come see her at 2 p.m. There we are informed that AH manager will no longer oversee our department. Actually, she will no longer work for the company due to objectives not aligning anymore with the business, whatever that means. Gossip has it that AH manager was always biting more than she could chew and caused issues across few departments. She was moved around because second chances. Well, we went back to our own schedules. When our manager came back from maternity leave and was told what happened, she laughed and said she raised us well. The next one is an entitled People Story. Rejoice, for it is again time for me to tell you another tale of one of the many entitled people I have had interactions with throughout the years. This story takes place back in the mid-2010s, maybe 2013 or 2014 during the summer. Back then, I was working in a safari park in Finland where we do guided tours around the park with a tractor and a large trailer for people to sit in. On this lovely morning, work started as normal. I came to work and got everything ready for the day. Once I was done, I headed over to the shop just outside the front entrance to the park where the other employee was sitting today. This shop is where you buy tickets for the safari tours. There had already been a few people who had bought tickets, but not that many, less than 10p in total. About 5 minutes before the first tour of the day, thus group of 5 Russians show up and in a thick Russian accent request to buy 5 tickets to the tour. The girl in the shop gets 5 tickets, punches them in, and since the tickets were 10 euros a piece, it tallied a nice even 50 euros for the group. Now this dude, who is clearly the leader of the group, let's call him Vladimir, pulls out his wallet and very demonstrably opens it up to show it's full of cash, neatly ordered 50 euros, 100 euros, 200 euros, and 500 euros bills. And it's very much obvious that he is deliberately displaying how much money he has, and it's easily over 10,000 euros in cash in there. He pulls out a 500 euros bill and drops it on the counter. Well, obviously, we don't have change for a 500 euros bill first thing in the morning, especially not since most people paid by card anyway. The shop lady tells the guy she can't give him change on that and asks if he has anything smaller, which he clearly did. We could both see a stack of 50 euros bills in his wallet. Well, he proceeds to whine about us not taking his money and that we have to take his money. Fun fact, we don't. Only when Vladimir is told he will be refused service if he can't either pay by card or has a smaller bill, does he take the 500 euros back and gives her an even 50 euros. Vladimir and his entourage now walks off to the gate, and I think to myself that this will be an interesting tour. Anyway, once it's time to start the tour, I go and open the gate and let everyone inside and load up everyone in the trailer. Vladimir and his pals line up on the back bench, and the rest of the people go sit in the front end of the trailer. Since all the rest of the people spoke Swedish, I gave them the tour introduction first. We are a Swedish-speaking region, and most of our customers wear Swedish. And then go behind the trailer to give the introduction to Vladimir and his pals. Vladimir promptly asks me to speak Russian. Unfortunately, I do not speak any Russian, and I tell him that. Now, Vladimir pulls out 100 euros from his wallet and says, "Come on, speak Russian." At this point, I am dumbfounded, so I just kind of freeze for a few seconds to just process the request. Well, Vladimir takes that as a bargaining tactic, I guess, and pulls out a 200 euros bill, and now, while holding 300 euros out, asks me again to speak Russian. I again tell Vladimir that I do not speak Russian. Well, apparently Vladimir thinks money can fix anything and whips out a 500 euros bill and screams at me, "Speak Russian." This time I had it, and tell him that I do not speak Russian, and I don't have time for this or a language course right now since we have other guests on this tour. At this point, he just stares at me while still waving his 500 euros bill at me like a feather in front of a kitten or something. I tell him that I would speak Russian if I could without charging anything extra for it, but I can't, and I will now go through the safety rules, and then we will start the tour. If they didn't like it, they could get of now. He just tells me out service is bad and sits down. The tour goes on without incident, but Vladimir and his pals doesn't say anything for the rest of the tour. They do not even really look at the animals, or go outside the trailer at the places where people are allowed outside the trailer. When we come back, he tells me he will tell my boss about my bad service and that I should learn Russian. They then disappear in their car, never to be seen or heard from again. I called the boss to tell her about the encounter. She just laughs at the stupidity and promises to give him an earful in Swedish if he ever calls her. Well, he never called her, so that was, I guess, a missed opportunity for some fun. So, this has been another of my many stories. There will be more in the future at irregular intervals. The next one is an entitled parent story. Cutting off my mother. I never wanted to make this post, but I'm seriously considering cutting my mother off because everyone else has disowned her and she is now trying to attach herself to me. Just wanted some outside perspective. I'm 34 per M and live with my girlfriend. I moved to a larger city a few years ago with her to start a new job, which can be very stressful on its own. My mother, 58, recently decided to move to the same city 20 minutes away from me with her BF, but realistically was more so her caretaker. Recently, he got fed up with her and left her for good. My sisters have completely cut her off over 5 years ago. Her sister and brother haven't talked to her in years after she sued them and just recently lost the case. Pretty much everyone. So I am the last holdout. She has had her mental issues since I've been a kid and would lay in bed most of the time, but it has progressively gotten worse, IMO. Her BF caretaker has been gone for about 2 months. She basically breaks even on her bills food every month because she gets $2,000 guaranteed in Social Security/disability. In the past 2 months, I have been over there around 12. 14 times. Bringing food over, moving boxes, helping her unpack her storage unit, getting her money orders for rent, visiting daily the past week to take care of her dogs after she was committed to the mental ward for threatening to kill herself, getting her Ubers, etc. Yet, she says I do not help her, and will keep making demands of me, such as picking her up from the hospital on a whim or dropping what I'm doing to go get her ginger ale, taking her dog to the vet, etc. She blows my phone up just today. 8 phone calls, probably around 60 plus FB messages, and then calling my apartment complex to reach me, which they then pounded on my door until I woke up when I was on very little sleep. She basically expects me to find her a new apartment, which she doesn't qualify for income-wise to get approved, but makes too much to get a restricted income unit. Wants me to pretty much pay for her top full teeth replacement because she doesn't want dentures, blows my phone up crying for help all the time. Whether it's due to her suicidal threats or medical issues, she basically goes to the hospital once every 2-3 months with new health issues, which has been a thing for at least the past 10 plus years. Watching, tending after her dogs when she's in the hospital psych ward for days or longer, dealing with the police, her landlord, and so on. She will just blow my phone up whether I'm at work or asleep at 6-9 a.m., just to name a few of the terrible decisions she has made the past 10 years for context. She had a fully paid-off house with 3 acres of land that she lost because she didn't pay her $1,000 per year property taxes. Her father originally paid off the first 3 years for her and cleared her debt, but then she let it stack up again even though she had renters in it for a while. The house was then taken by the county. Her father financed a nice SUV for her that she swore to him she would make the payments on, which she defaulted on shortly after getting it. He then took the car back from her, and because he didn't want to see her without transportation, gave her his 2-year-old low-mile Camry free and clear. She then takes a secured loan out against it, doesn't pay them, and loses the Camry. My grandfather wrote her out of the trust will due to behavior like this. She then sues my uncle and aunt for her supposed inheritance, even though they offered her my grandfather's house, or to set up an account to pay her major bills for her and give her $7,000 a year to do with as she saw fit. She just lost the case for having no merit a few months ago. Her long-term BF caretaker just left her for good 2 months ago because he could no longer deal with her demands, poor choices, and overall behavior. So now she has double the bills. She has spent the little money she has, easily $20,000 over the past 5 years, trying to keep her 19-year-old dog alive as long as possible. The dog is still suffering to this day, and I'm trying to get her to put it down and rehome the other one because she is not fit to take care of it. She is also would send her own money to overseas Nigerian romance scammers, even though I and everyone else guaranteed her it was a scam. I feel like she is just a professional victim. I'm just not really sure what to do besides cut her off. She'll probably either become homeless or try to kill herself, but she stresses me out so much to where it is starting to affect my physical and mental health. Every time I turn around, there is a new problem, tragedy that she expects me to help her with. She says I do not want to help her, even though literally in just the past week I have gone over every day after my 11-hour shifts to walk/feed her dogs. Cleaned up after them inside because they refused to go outside, deal with her landlord calling the police claiming her dogs are abandoned, and putting notices on her door, got her several Ubers home, offered to have ginger ale/water/dog food delivered, a cleaner come over to clean up after the dog messes inside, and a service that will put the dog down at her apartment. Anyway, thank you for watching.